Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today's video isn't really a gun thing, so this may or may not be your cup of tea. Today's video was spurred by this 1927 challenge coin is really what it is, that a viewer sent me, and as I started digging into it, I ended up finding this really interesting story that I figured I would share with you guys today. So, if you're looking for guns, come back tomorrow and we'll have a cool one. But if you're interested in the history of the 1927 American Legion Convention, stick around. So, the American Legion, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is a veteran service organization. It was originally founded in 1919 in France, in Paris actually, by a committee of American officers who, in the process of trying to figure out what to do to improve morale among U.S. troops, because in 1919 the war is over, but there are a lot of American soldiers who are still stuck in France waiting to demobilize and go home, and it kind of sucks, and morale is kind of crashing, and the officership is looking for something to do to fix this. And kind of as an aside to what can we do to improve the conditions and the morale of the troops here, they came up with the concept of, let's start a veteran service organization, a group of veterans to advocate for veterans, help support each other. And what's interesting is this was intended to be a universal veterans organization, which kind of seems obvious to us today, but it wasn't necessarily the case in 1919, because the American Legion took over basically for the two previously existing veterans organizations, both of which were highly politically polarized, because one of them was the United Confederate Veterans of the South, and one of them was the Grand Army of the Republic, which was basically the same thing for Union veterans of the Civil War. As you might expect, there wasn't a whole lot of overlap between these two groups. And the idea for the American Legion was it would not only span all political boundaries, it would also cover officers and enlisted men. This is not necessarily an obvious thing in 1919 either, that you should have both classes of soldiers together. And it was intended to cross all economic, racial, political, social structures. So, pretty cool. Founded in 1919 in Paris, like I said, and ended up becoming a fairly active, fairly successful organization. And they decided for it was actually their 8th annual convention, which would have been on the 10th anniversary of the U.S. entering World War I, which of course happened in 1917. So for the 1927 convention, they decided to return to Paris. And they were planning this thing for years in advance. There are notices, like in 1925 American Legion newspapers, that, hey, this is coming, start saving your money. Advice on how do you get a month's vacation from your employer when 2 weeks is typical. Well, what you should do is not take a vacation in 1926. Let them know right now. Don't take a vacation in 26, and then you'll have 4 weeks of vacation in 1927, because this was going to be a month-long trip. If you wanted to go to this convention, the plan was you're probably going to spend about 2 weeks in France, because you don't want to get there for a short time and waste the week-long travel period to get there and another week to get back. This was done by steamship. They chartered something like 20 steamships to get what turned out to be 20,000 American Legion members over to France. That was like 2/3 of the organization's membership at the time, if the numbers I found are correct. They organized this with the French government years in advance. The French actually set up a whole extra bureaucracy to help deal with travel issues and issues in Paris and coordination for this event. It was a major thing. They were invited formally by the President of France. There were keynote speeches by guys like Foch and Pétain, the Allied and French commanders from World War I. And the idea would be this wasn't just a normal annual convention. It was also sort of a memorial trip. This is something that most of the veterans of World War I had probably never had a chance to go back by this point. And so this was a chance to go back, meet with French veterans as well, tour some of the battlefields, meet with other veterans who understood everything that they had gone through fighting in the war. And this little challenge coin that I started out this video with was actually minted for the occasion. You can find these on places like eBay, actually, to commemorate the event. Let me show you this up close. I have to admit, I never really considered that there was, like, the challenge coin was a 1920s thing, and yet that is pretty much exactly what this is. So here on the front, we have the Statue of Liberty representing the U.S. over the horizon, and we have 3 steamships full of American Legionnaires coming over. On the bottom side, we have Paris with, of course, the Arc de Triomphe, and the thing here in the center is the tomb of the unknown soldier under the Arc de Triomphe. And then the writing here, Visite de l'American Legion en France, September 1927. And it's one of the things that jumped out at me before I realized exactly what this was. Is I'm like, I don't really quite speak French yet, but l'American Legion doesn't seem like proper grammar. Well, that's because it's the proper name of the organization in English. Anyway, on the reverse, we have an American doughboy on the right and a French farmer on the left, greeting each other, and the inscription on the top, forever. So yeah, really pretty darn cool. So I think this turned into a pretty cool thing. As it turns out, there was a bunch of 16mm film footage shot of various parts of the event. Interestingly, a lot of it of the guys like playing at Coney Island before they debarked for France, and then a whole bunch of it of one of, I think, the major parade that they held in Paris of all of the American Legion veterans who showed up. And this film footage was actually digitized by the American Legion, and they have posted it on YouTube. So I'll have a link in the description and at the end of this video where you can go take a look. It's like 14.5 minutes. It's not exactly the most riveting footage, but I think there's some really cool stuff in there. It's neat to see. In addition, the current American Legion has also digitized and made available the official program for the 1927 convention, which is something like 140 pages long. And again, I think it's really interesting reading. At the beginning, it's pretty bland. It's like an organization of, the finance committee will meet here for these hours, and then this committee and that committee. But skip past some of those pages, and you will get to discussion of what's the battlefield tourism like in 1927 in France. Where are the places to go visit? A lot of it is what is the history of the different battlefields, helping some of these vets who maybe didn't know at this point, like, here's what you did in greater context of the whole war. So there's a lot of historical information like that in there. Tips for traveling in Europe and in France, which are interesting to read today to see some things that have changed a lot, some things that haven't changed one bit at all. The official meetings actually took place on the Trocadero, which is kind of neat. The old Trocadero Palace. This is the most famous picture you may recognize taken from the Trocadero is the one of Hitler with the Eiffel Tower in the background. It's the promenade where he's standing is the Trocadero. Although at the time that they held the 1927 American Legion Convention, it was the old Trocadero Palace, which was demolished in 1937 to build a new building, which is pretty cool and still a huge landmark. But that's where they held it, for what it's worth. Anyway, I will include a link. Well, I'll include a copy on ForgottenWeapons.com of the PDF of the actual convention program. Even if you're just interested in, like, what were the advertisements like in 1927, where they're trying to sell train tickets and hotels and cigarettes to the American Legionnaires. Anyway, I'll include a link to it in the description, as well as a copy of the whole thing over on Forgotten Weapons if you want to download it and just browse through it. I think it's a really neat story. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed that.